Hi everyone, this is Chris from iSolutions showing you another demonstration of some stuff that we've been working on in the iSolutions lab. This time, more of the same. I'm going to be showing you a demonstration of WebViewer embedded into a FileMaker layout that is being used to pull local data. None of this is on the web. All of this is right inside the FileMaker database. And in this case, what we're using the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS combination of in this demo is to show you another way to look at records that have dates. So you might recognize this this database here. It's the project management database that I've used in previous demonstration videos. Of course, you may remember the progress bar or the Gantt chart. If not, you can find these on FileMakerHTML5.com or on our YouTube channel. But what I'm going to concentrate on this time is the data that you see here in this portal in the middle of the screen. Now, this is a project management database, and each project has related tasks. And each one of these tasks are assigned to a contributor, and they have a start date. So we could look at all these sort of, kind of sorted by date if we want to, but I thought a more compelling way to view these dates would be in a calendar view. Now, of course, you can do all sorts of stuff with a calendar, and I don't want to undersell the idea of embedding calendars into your database. But in this case, instead of providing interactive drag and drop ability to add and delete event type calendars, which are totally possible using this technique, instead what I'm going to show you is a calendar display, meaning I'm going to take this data that you see here and actually show it to you in a calendar. So what I've done is I have this button right here, and this button pops up a new layout, and in this layout we've got a web viewer, and it's an interactive web viewer, and it's fully dynamic. In this case, when I say dynamic, this one's a pretty big deal. I put a lot of effort into building the HTML internally, and it's dynamic in the fact that the only months that show, you see we've got January, February, March, April, and then there's no other months. I have the calculations actually determining which months are represented in the list of tasks, and when new tasks are created outside this month, it'll create a new month. So here I don't have another one past April, but if I hit add event, I can go on here and say, let's say a May event, and I'll assign this one to one of our contributors, and from the date I'll pick May, let's say May 9th, and go ahead and close the window so it commits. And because everything's driven by an unstored calculation, you'll notice that I don't have to go push anything to the code. It's all a calculation that's drawing, and now you see that May shows up. And not only does May show up, but the event shows up as well. And you'll notice that as I go from month to month, I've used the CSS to highlight any event that actually has, or any date on the calendar that has events associated with it, and I make those blue with white text. And I also have this pretty cool kind of aesthetic rollover or hover over, so I can see all the different events for that day. And this becomes a really great way for a project manager to be able to see which days are going to be busy, or in this case I can see this whole week's going to be really busy, and if I want to learn more about the events that are happening, I can just roll over them. And the whole thing's fully dynamic, like I mentioned before. It's all driven by calculations. The days that are drawn are driven by calculation. The amount of months that are drawn are driven by calculations, and none of this requires a web connection. So the same spirit of all the different demos that I've been showing you, fully localized data. And let's take a look a little bit behind the scenes how this is working. First of all, this is a calculation. You see a little bit of a preview of the calculation. It's a web viewer that points to an unstored calculation, same concept that we've been doing in all these demos, and I allow interaction with the web viewer. But before I show you the calculation itself, let's look over at the source code. In this case, the source is made up of two different JavaScript files. And as usual, rather than having to rely on a web connection, I've just embedded these as fields inside our database. I'll show you that in a second. And then one CSS. And this CSS originally had some external image references that of course would have required a web server, but I've come up with a solution there as well. But here's the thing that we want to concentrate on. Like any of these other demos, you'll see that if you have even just some cursory understanding of HTML, you'll see that really not much is going on here. All this calendar really is just a table, and a table with some CSS applied to it. So you see here that the column headers are really just the, what we're doing for column headers is doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So this is a permanent, non-dynamic element. And the rest of them, the body, as you can see here, just a series of rows. Now I had to go in and create some calculations that dynamically drew which days would be in any given row, depending on whether or not that month of that year started with the first of that month on a Monday or Sunday and so on, and I had to just dynamically draw each row. I'll show you that. It's kind of a complicated calculation, but its complexity has zero to do with HTML or JavaScript. It's just all FileMaker stuff. And then when we actually come across a date, as you see here, that actually has an event, I need to have an event that's formatted in this manner. And I can have multiple events, but they all need to be formatted in that manner. And even if you don't know anything about HTML, you know that you have to have this text, a line break, or I'm sorry, this text, a line break, and then the text that you're hoping to display wrapped in certain tags. Again, don't need to know what it does, but that's the general idea of what your task is as far as drawing this or creating a calculation that will display this HTML inside of a web viewer. So back in the FileMaker database, now if I go into browse mode, there's a couple of key calculations that we're using here. So first what I do, and this is kind of similar to all the other demos that you've seen before, what I do is I go down to the task level, down to the child table. And on the child table, what I've done is I've created a calculation field. And the calculation field says, just like I was showing you in the raw HTML, it does the text of this line, gives me a return character, and then it puts the start date, the value in the start date field for the task, wrapped in all the appropriate tags. And then the next line is where I put the contributor name, a semicolon, and then the actual task that they're performing. And this will only evaluate when we actually have values for this task. Otherwise, these won't appear. And that is driven by the fact that over on the parent level, which is events, I'm creating down here this task month array. What it's doing is it's just going from the parent using a relationship that I set up in FileMaker to only look at this array that I'm creating, task day of month. So basically it just creates an array of dates that actually have a value, and then for those dates that have a value, and this is where all the guts of the situation are coming from. Here, for dates that have value, I'm actually showing the values in the context of the parent. So this is a bit verbose. This is no question the most FileMaker programming I've had to do for any of these demos. But what's happening here in the meat of the, well, actually, hold on, let me go back and show you something. This is the actual calculation field that I showed you. This is the one that the web viewer is based on. Pretty simple stuff here. We've got the header HTML, got the CSS, JavaScript, and then the closing HTML. But the key here is in the middle is the task calc calculation. And that is this calculation. So it goes from all that header information into the header row, the first row of our table. So we open up a table and filtering out some of the labels from the month selector. And so the user is picking a month. And when they pick the month, we draw all the days of the week in the column headers. And then I do a little calculation here to determine where we start. If the first day of the month for the chosen month is a Sunday, then I have to start the rows in a certain way. If it's a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, I do a bunch of different calculations that way. It just required that I do a little bit of calculation formatting there. So just isolating one of the days, what I've done is I've created a little cluster, a little if statement cluster for every potential day of the month, and I've applied some conditions down here on the 31st, the 29th, and the 30th for obvious reasons. Not all months have 29th, 30th, and 31st. But within each one of these, what I'm doing, just to kind of break it all up here, is I have this first if, and I say if the task month array, and what the task month array is, it's an array of the chosen month of all the days in that month where there's a task. So if I choose January and there's only a task on the 7th, then I'm just going to get an array that says 7th. And what I've done is I've wrapped these in little pipe characters for the purpose of me being able to do a pattern count, because if I try to do a pattern count just for the number 1, if one of the dates is 10 or 11, then that's going to show up as a true. So in this case, what I did is I wrapped it pipe 1 pipe, and so now I can say if I actually see the pattern count pipe 1 pipe is greater than 0, then I actually have a true. So after that, if it's true, then what I do is I move on to this next one and I say, is the date the 1st? And if the date is the 1st, then I have to see what day of the week it is. And if the date is the month that the user has selected, and it's the 1st, and it's the year of the selector, and it happens to be a Sunday, then I draw a row. I open up the row and I put the number 1 in there, and then in the middle what I'm doing is actually populating it with data. And this is why I wanted to isolate this. This was kind of a cool little example of this. I wanted to show you, instead of using my list function like I usually do, in this case I've done something kind of interesting, and because what this list function would have had to do is not just give me all the events, but all the events where in the chosen month is the key. So what I instead did here is I did a execute SQL, and what this is allowing me to do is select all the tasks from the task day month calculation that I created, where the value is 1 and the month matches the month selector. And I found that just in my experiments that doing the execute SQL with an evaluate function in there was able to do it with very high performance and do it very accurately and actually find just the data that I wanted to. I experimented a little bit with list functions like I usually use, but in this case execute SQL was very valuable. This time I didn't have to do a unique or a distinct value, but execute SQL really helped me get through that problem there. And then at the very bottom of this, you see it's just more of the same logic. Feel free to pause and take a closer look at this if you're interested in more details on it. And what I did here, I commented out what the original HTML sample looked like, just to kind of give me something to work off of. So once I created that, then you can actually see here how the month array that I was showing you works. The month array says that only on the 17th is there an event in January, and you'll notice when I go over to February, I get this array of even more values. And what I do is I take those values and I substitute out the return characters, and I instead wrap them in pipes. And then I say for the first date to display the values here. This is actually what's driving the Java hover here, as it says, well, is there an event on the 2nd, by looking in here and seeing if there's a number 2 in my array, and if so, then I display that event, and that's where I'm using the execute SQL. Now to actually draw the entire HTML of the calendar, that's the task calc, and you'll see when I hover over that, when I move my data viewer down a little bit, you'll see what I get is actually HTML that is drawing on the top of my page, so apologies for that. But you'll see that it's the HTML, it's the same HTML that we captured. If you see, it looks a lot like the sample HTML, but in this case it's dynamically generated from FileMaker calculations. So it's a pretty simple table that's being drawn, but I used my FileMaker skill set to be able to create a calculation that outputs that. So it's pretty exciting. I really like being able to see dates displayed in this manner, in this dynamic calendar display with this cool hover over effect. And of course, my favorite part of it is that because I made the decision when I first chose the JavaScript that I was going to use, is that I made sure to choose JavaScript that would work on iOS devices as well. So here you see the same database, but it's on my iPad, and in this case I can, if I want to look at my project management database on the iPad, I can look at it in the same manner, and those cool little hover over effects are still supported over on the iPad. So once again, certainly appreciate you guys watching this video. I hope this has been inspiring to you. This is part of a demonstration file that, well, the bonus that I'll give you for actually sitting through to the 15-minute mark on this video is that I am going to be giving away this demonstration file that includes the calendar, all the Gantt charts, the accordion list view, the progress bar, all this kind of stuff. I'm giving it away at my DevCon session. So if you're watching this before the first or second week of August, I urge you to head on down to San Diego to the FileMaker Developer Conference. And if you go to my session, I'll be giving this file away wide open so you can see all the different coding, and you got all the JavaScript embedded in there for you, and you can break it apart and put it into your own solution, all that kind of good stuff. So certainly appreciate you watching, and we'll see you at DevCon. And this is Chris from iSolutions signing off, and thank you very much.